Now, like I said, we are heading towards the end of that, which means that we should be thinking about who should be the league's MVP. But he was only at 4 weeks, and that 4 weeks seems to give Jerry Jones the hesitation. And I'm not going to lie, I think that this excuse is very poor from Jerry Jones. So we are in the middle of the Women's Euros. We just had the semifinals. Now, Rich Hill was drafted back in 2002. This man is 45 years old, and he is still playing. He is, like I mentioned before, the oldest active player. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. If you're new here, welcome. This podcast is about everything sports, from men's to women's, from collegiate to professional, from domestic to international. So, this episode will be covering everything that has happened in the last week. So, this episode will be split into 4 sections. In the first section, we will be talking about the WNBA. We just got back from All-Star break, so we will be recapping a few of the big games that's happened in the last week, as well as discuss who should be the league's MVP, as well as talk about the potential return of a certain player. In the next section, we will be talking about football. The new season is coming up very, very soon. We are about to start preseason, so we will be talking about the latest news when it comes to the latest contracts that have been signed or lack thereof. We will be talking about the latest news about a certain player that's going to be out for this season. And then we will be giving our predictions for the first preseason game that's coming up this week. In the next section, we will be talking all about soccer. We are in the middle of the Women's Euros and the Women's Copa America, so we will be recapping what has happened so far. And then afterwards, we will be talking about the latest transfer of a certain player and provide some updates about that. And then in the last section, we will be talking about baseball. It will be a quick recap about 2 big news that has happened in the last week. So, with all that being said, let's get on with the episode. So, let's start with the first section, the WNBA. Now, like I mentioned beforehand, we just got back from All-Star break, so let's talk about some of the big games that has happened in the last week. So, starting with Tuesday, first we had the Liberty face the Fever, who are still without Caitlin Clark as she is out with a groin injury. Now, the Liberty did win 98-84, with Jonquel Jones coming up big for the team, coming up with 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists. And Brianna Stewart came up big for the team as well, ending the game with 17 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals. Now, despite missing their star player, the Fever actually played such a close game, and they did have 2 players that ended with such a good game. We had Kelsey Mitchell, who came up with a massive 29 points during this game. And then we had Aaliyah Boston, who came up with a double-double, ending the game with 15 points and 12 rebounds, and then with 6 assists to go along with it. Now, while the Fever were playing the Liberty, we also had the Sky face the Minnesota Lynx. And the Lynx completely dominated, winning 91-68. Then we saw a great performance from star player Nafisa Collier, who ended the game with 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. And even guard Kayla McBride had a good game, ending the game with 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. Now, despite this devastating loss, Angel Reese for the Chicago Sky came up with yet another double-double, adding on to her streak of double-doubles this season. She ended the game with 11 points and 11 rebounds. And guard Kia Nurse also had a good game, ending the game with 16 points and 8 rebounds. And then later on, we had the Wings face the Storm, where the Wings ended up winning 87-63. Guard Arike Ngumbawale actually had a good game, ending the game with 20 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. And rookie Paige Beckers is having such a great rookie season, and this was shown in this game, as she ended the game with 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. And for the Storm, forward Nneka Ogwumike ended the game with 22 points, and forward Gabby Williams also had a good game, ending the game with 14 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, and 4 steals. And now let's move on to Thursday, where the Aces face the Fever, who are again still without Caitlin Clark. But even though they were without their star player, they still came up with the win against Asia Wilson and the Aces, winning 80-70. We saw a great performance from Kelsey Mitchell, who ended the game with 21 points. And we also saw a great performance from Natasha Howard, who ended the game with a massive double-double, ending the game with 18 points and 13 rebounds. And then for the aces, center Asia Wilson had a good game, ending the game with 20 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 3 steals. And forward Nalissa Smith also had a good game, ending the game with a double-double with 10 points and 10 rebounds. And right after that, we had the Storm face the Chicago Sky, in which the Storm completely dominated, winning 95-57. Guard Skylar Diggins had a great game, ending the game with 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. And guard Erica Wheeler also had a good game, ending the game with 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. And then for the Sky, who were missing their star player Angel Reese due to a back injury, Camila Cardoso ended the game with a double-double, ending the game with 13 points and 13 rebounds. And guard Rachel Banham also came up for the team, ending the game with 13 points and 2 rebounds. And then we move on to Friday, where the Mercury faced the Liberty, and the Mercury won 89-76. Alyssa Thomas had a great game for the team. She ended the game with 20 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals. And Kalia Copper also had a good game for the team, ending the game with 14 points and 3 rebounds. And guard Sabrina Ionescu had a great game, ending the game with a massive 29 points with 5 rebounds and 8 assists. And center Jonquel Jones had a good game, ending the game with a double-double with 20 points and 11 rebounds. And then right after that game, we had the Wings face the Valkyries, where the Valkyries won 86-76. Forward Janelle Solon came up big for the team, ending the game with 16 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. And then guard Tiffany Hayes also came up big for the team, ending the game with 17 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists. And then for the Wings, guard Arike Gumbawale had a good game, ending the game with 16 points and 3 assists. And guard Paige Beckers also had a good game, ending the game with 17 points, 6 assists, and 4 steals. Now you can see from these games, from these scores, from these stats, how much the season is picking up. We are heading towards the end of the regular season and going into the postseason. So you're going to see a lot of pressure and a lot of battles between these teams. So I cannot wait for this. So speaking of heading towards the end of the season, I want to shift away from talking about the recap of the latest games and talk more now about the WNBA MVP. Now, like I said, we are heading towards the end of that, which means that we should be thinking about who should be the league's MVP. Now, for me personally, I think the decision comes down to 3 players. Lynx is Napheesa Collier, Aces is Asia Wilson, or Liberty's Breanna Stewart. So let's talk about it. So, starting first with Napheesa. She is averaging 23 points per game, which she is actually leading the league in points. She's averaging 8 rebounds per game, which she is 9th in the league. 3 assists per game, 2 steals, which she is 5th in the league in steals, and 2 blocks, where she is 4th in the league in blocks per game. Now, moving on to Asia. Now, she is averaging 22 points per game, which she is 2nd in the league. She's averaging 9 rebounds per game, which she is 2nd in the league. 3 assists per game, 2 blocks per game, which she leads the league in blocks. And 2 steals per game, where she is 8th in the league. Now, moving on to Breanna Stewart. She is 5th in the league in points per game with 19 points. She's averaging 7 rebounds per game. She's averaging 4 assists per game. She's averaging 1 block per game. She's actually 5th in the league in blocks. And she's averaging 2 steals per game. Now, I think, me personally, of the 3 women, I think the WNBA MVP should go to Napheesa. She is top 10 in just about all of the major stats. And not only that, but she is the star of the top team in the league. I think Asia Wilson is having, of course, such a great season. I think Breanna Stewart is having a great season. But I think for Napheesa, I think because of the fact that she is leading the best team right now in the league, as well as being top in the major stats, I think the MVP award should go to her. And with that, I think that 2025 just completely belongs to Napheesa when it comes to MVPs. Now, if you didn't know, she was the MVP for the league Unrivaled that she co-founded with Breanna Stewart. She was the All-Star MVP after she broke the record for the most points scored in an All-Star game. And I do believe, too, that the league is going to give her the WNBA MVP. This is just a year for Nafisa. She's having such a great year, and I think it is very well deserved. She is such a great player, and I can't wait to see how she develops in the next couple of years. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about the return of a certain player. And that certain player is Cameron Brink, the center for the LA Sparks. Now, if you didn't know, last year during her rookie season, she tore her ACL in June during the first quarter of their game against the Connecticut Sun. Now, there was a little hope that she would return this season, but as of right now, there is no definitive timeline of when she would return to the court. But there has been good news that has been reported, which is that Cameron has been cleared to play. She has been participating in shoot-arounds with the team, and she has been practicing with the team. But the coach is hopeful that Cameron will return soon before the regular season ends. So it is just a great sight to see. Can't wait to see Cameron back onto the court, and can't wait to see how much she would further develop her game. So moving away from basketball, let's now talk about the NFL. Now, we have had some latest news and everything that's happened, so let's talk about it. So the first set of news I want to talk about is all about contracts. That has been the biggest topic of discussion for the past few weeks. So let's recap. So, of course, we've had the players who have signed the big contracts. So first we had TJ Watt, who signed a 3-year, $123 million deal with the Steelers, making him the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. And then we had Jamar Chase, who signed a 4-year, $161 million deal with the Bengals, which makes him the highest paid non-quarterback player in the league. And then it was just reported a few days ago that rookie Shamar Stewart, the last rookie who did not sign his contract, has finally signed his 4-year, $18.97 million deal with the Bengals. And the Bengals took out the controversial clause that caused Shamar to not sign in the first place. So, like I said before, we've had the players that have signed their big contracts. But then we still have players who have not signed their contracts yet. As an example, Cowboys player Micah Parsons has yet to sign his extension with the Cowboys. And there seems to be little movement, according to him, when it comes to these contract negotiations. Now, just from the way that everything sounds, it seems like the money amount is just not in agreement between the two parties. It seems like the Cowboys don't want to pay him as much as he would like, and it seems like he wants to be paid as highly as players such as Raiders' Max Crosby and even TJ Watt, like I mentioned before. Now, Jerry Jones did mention beforehand that one of the biggest hesitations that he has, it seems like, is the fact that Micah is just injured. He talked about how just because we're going to sign him doesn't mean we're going to have him, and talked about the injuries that Micah was suffering last season. Now, just to provide a little bit of context, Micah was out 4 weeks, and he was out because of a high ankle sprain. Outside of that, he was available, but he was only out 4 weeks, and that 4 weeks seems to give Jerry Jones the hesitation. And I'm not going to lie, I think that this excuse is very poor from Jerry Jones. I think that Micah absolutely deserves it. He was 5th in the league in sacks last season. He is a 4-time Pro Bowler. Now, I don't think that the Cowboys would be able to sign him as much as the Steelers signed TJ Watt, as an example, only because of how big of a contract that they gave to Dak Prescott a couple years ago. But I do think that they will be able to give Parsons some sort of high deal where he is actually valued on the team. Now, hopefully the two parties can come to an agreement. But if not, this is the last year that is on Micah's contract, which means after this upcoming season, we may see Micah move on to another team. But like I said, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Now, the next player who has not signed their contract yet is receiver Terry McLaurin. It seems like conversations and negotiations with the Commanders when it comes to his extension deal is right now stagnant. Now, just for context, Terry is on his last year of his 3-year, $71 million deal with the team. And just from the sounds of it, it seems like McLaurin is not getting the amount of money that he is looking for, especially looking at players such as Jamar Chase, who just signed his new contract, like I mentioned before. Now, just to provide a little bit of context about McLaurin, last season he recorded for 82 catches for 1,096 yards, and he had a franchise record 13 touchdowns in the last season. And he was one of the biggest reasons as to why the Commanders made it all the way to the NFC Championship. Now, I don't think McLaurin's going to be paid as much as Jamar, but I can see the Commanders paying McLaurin about $30 million a year because that is the market average that is right now for the receivers. So we would just have to wait and see. And the last player who I want to talk about who has not signed their contract yet is Bengals player Trey Hendrickson. Now, according to reports in the last couple of weeks, it seemed like the biggest issue with Trey and the Bengals was that they could not agree when it comes to the amount of money. And reports just showed that actually a few days ago, they were able to settle that and they were able to agree on the money aspect, which is good. So what's the issue now? The issue is the amount of the guaranteed money. So according to reports, it looks like Hendrickson wants 2 years to be guaranteed, whereas the Bengals is only offering 1 year to be guaranteed, and that is where the issues are coming in. So Hendrickson and the Bengals are currently in their contract negotiations. We just saw the Bengals make their agreement with Stewart, like I mentioned beforehand. So I do think relatively soon we're going to see Trey and the Bengals come up with their agreement, and we will just have to wait and see for some updates. So that's enough contract talk as of right now. Let's move away from that and talk about one of the big news that has hit, which is that Titans quarterback Will Levis will be getting surgery on his shoulder, which means that he will not be available for the upcoming season. Now, this does mean that rookie quarterback and the number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward, will be the starting quarterback for the Titans for this upcoming season. Now, I am going to be honest, I was never a big fan of Will Levis. I wasn't a fan of him when he was in Kentucky, and I was not really a big fan of him last season. But I am a big fan of Cam Ward. I find that Ward can pass better than Levis. I think that he has a higher IQ than Will. I think that he can read the defense better than Will. I think that Cam Ward will have a great season with the Titans. I think he's going to do with the Titans to an extent what Jaden Daniels did with the Commanders last season. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think that the Titans are going to be top in the AFC like the Chiefs and the Bills? No, I don't think so. I don't think that it's going to be on that level as to what Jaden Daniels was able to do with the Commanders. But I think he's going to be able to do what Jaden did, which is take a team that is struggling and be able to turn it around in the first year. I do think that the Titans are going to have a winning record, and I wouldn't be shocked if they were a wild card team. But I don't think, like I said before, that they're going to be a top team in the AFC. I think that is going to have to develop in the next couple of years. But I do think that Cam Ward is going to do a lot better with the Titans than what Will Levis did. But we will just have to just wait and see. And before we move on to the next section, we of course have to talk about the first preseason game that is set for this Thursday, and that is between the Detroit Lions and the LA Chargers. Now, for the Chargers, they did add a few offensive weapons to their team. As an example, they signed Steelers running back Najee Harris to a 1-year deal, but as of right now, he is out with an eye injury. He is supposed to be back by Thursday. Hopefully, he is back by the time this game starts. But if not, of course, the Chargers did also sign running back Omarion Hampton from North Carolina with the 22nd overall pick. And then for the Lions, of course, they still have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They still have Jahmyr Gibbs, which it was reported that Jahmyr will be playing more of a slot receiver position. Also be playing the running back position, but they're also going to move him into the slot receiver position. Of course, you still have David Montgomery, and you still have some other players. Now, I do think that between the two teams, just as a prediction, I do think that the Lions are going to win. I think they are the stronger team. I think they have a better offensive team. And I think that the Chargers are going to struggle against the Lions. I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions won by about 14 points. And I just don't think that the Chargers would really have enough to be able to compete with the Lions. We saw how strong of a team they were last season, especially during the regular season. And I think they are going to show their strength also in this preseason game. But I'm really excited to watch, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Before we continue, please be sure to check out the description box down below, which gives you all of my social media accounts. If you want to see more latest news and daily reactions, then you can go follow my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook page. If you want to see what a day in my life kind of looks like, what I am up to, then you can go follow my Snapchat. If you want to see some daily hot takes and ask some questions and have a little bit of a discussion, then you can follow my threads and my X accounts. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please be sure to give this a 5-star rating. Please be sure to follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure you turn on notifications so you do not miss a single episode. So let's move on to the next section, which is all about soccer. So let's start first with discussing the Women's Euros. So we are in the middle of the Women's Euros. We just had the semifinals. And by the time this episode airs, we would have had the Women's Euros final. So let's just recap what has happened during the semifinals. So in the first semifinals game, we had England who faced Italy, and England won 2-1. So Italy was leading 1-0 against England after Barbara Bonaccia scored the first goal of the match and the first goal for Italy in the 33rd minute. But then England had 2 goals scored right afterwards, one from Michelle Agyemang, and then the next one from Chloe Kelly to seal the match for England. Now, just looking at pure stats, you can see that England took a lot more shots than Italy did. In fact, they took about twice as many shots as Italy did. They took 24 shots, whereas Italy took 11. And on top of that, England had possession of the ball for longer than Italy did. England had possession of the ball for 58% of the time, whereas Italy had possession of the ball 42% of the time. So it was a very dominant match from England. Even though England only won 2-1, you can see that England really just had a great defensive presence, was always stealing the ball from Italy, and Italy was just not able to recuperate. And then the second semifinal match was between Spain and Germany. Now, the match was scoreless the entire time, right? Germany and Spain were going back and forth. And then at the end of extra time, we saw a goal from star player Aitana Bonmati and sealed the game for Spain. Now, just looking purely at the stats, you can see that Spain also took more shots than Germany. And you also saw that Spain had possession of the ball longer than Germany did, where they had possession of the ball 67% of the time. Now, even though the possession disparity between the two teams is large, it was still a very back and forth match. It was a very great defensive match between the two teams. So, now in the final, we have England facing Spain. Now, by the time this episode airs, we would have already known who won the final and who would be the champion, but that will be discussed in next week's episode. But what I will say is that what's interesting about this is that these two were the exact same teams that played in last year's Euros for the men's. In last year's Euros, it was England who faced Spain, and Spain ended up winning for the men's teams. Now, it will be interesting to see if Spain will be able to win this year for the women's team, but also we see how good of a team England is. I think it's going to be a great match, and we're just going to have to wait to see exactly who wins. Now, looking away from the women's Euros, let's talk about the women's Copa America. We finished up the first round last week, so let's do a quick rapid fire as to what the scores were for last week. Venezuela beat Bolivia 7-1. Colombia beat Paraguay 4-1. Argentina beat Peru 1-0 after Yamila Rodriguez scored the one and only goal for Argentina and for the match in the 88th minute. Chile beat Ecuador 2-1 after Nayeli Bolaños scored a penalty kick for Ecuador in the 24th minute. And Sonia Keefe and Nayadet Lopez scored a goal each for Chile. Colombia beat Bolivia 8-0. Brazil beat Paraguay 4-1. Argentina beat Ecuador 2-0 after Kishi Denise Nunez and Florencia Bonsegundo each scored a goal for Argentina. Uruguay beat Chile 3-0 after Pamela Gonzalez scored a penalty kick for the team, and then Wendy Carballo scored the next 2 goals for the team. Brazil and Colombia tied at 0 apiece. And then Paraguay beat Venezuela 2-1 after Oriana Altuve scored the first goal of the match and the first goal for Venezuela. And then Maria Leiva and Claudia Ovando each scored a goal for Paraguay. So by the time this episode airs, we would have had the match for 5th place, which is between Chile and Paraguay. Now, I do think that it's going to be a really good match, and we will just have to discuss it next week. Now, this week, we do have the semifinals match. We have Argentina that's facing Colombia, and we have Brazil that's facing Uruguay. Now, just as a prediction, I do think that we're going to see Colombia face Brazil. I think we are going to have a rematch of their last match in the first round where it was tied at 0. So this means I do think that Argentina is going to face Uruguay in the match for third place. And I think both of these matches would be very good. It's going to be a great match, and I just cannot wait to see. But that is just my prediction. Now, before we move on to the last section, we have to talk about one big transfer that has happened, and that is the update on Manchester United player Marcus Rashford. Now, it has been officially confirmed that Rashford will be playing for Barcelona for the entire season next season. Now, Rashford is playing for the team on loan, and he did take a pay cut where Barcelona will be paying him 14 million euros for the year. And Rashford allowed this pay cut to happen so that way the transfer could go through. Now, what's also interesting about this is that Rashford has in his contract a 30 million euro purchase option, which means that as long as Rashford has a really good season and Barcelona really likes him, they will be able to take Rashford from Man United for 30 million euros. Now, whether given Barcelona's financial situation, whether they will be able to even make this purchase happen is something we would just have to see in the future. But it is nice to see Rashford back onto the pitch. It is nice to see Barcelona sign another great attacker just to add to their lineup. And I cannot wait to see Rashford perform in La Liga. So, with all of that, let's move on to the last section, which is all about the MLB. This is going to be a real quick section. I want to talk about two big things that has happened in the last week. So, first one is when the Phillies beat the Red Sox. And so you may be thinking, okay, well, it's just a simple win. What could be so special about it? It's the fact of how exactly they won. So, yeah, Phillies batter Edmundo Sosa, who was at bat, and as he's about to swing, the catcher for the Red Sox ended up interfering with the swing, so the umpire called a catcher interference. Now, the biggest thing about this is that the bases were already loaded, which meant that because Edmundo was going to go automatically to first base, it allowed Bryce Harper to come in from third base and score. So that was how the Phillies ended up beating the Red Sox. Now, when it comes to a catcher's interference, that call has not been made since 1971. That call has not been made in 50 years. So the fact that this happened now in the 21st century, and that is how the Phillies won, is truly madness. Now, the catcher did speak right after the game, and he said that that was absolutely his fault, and he wants to make sure that that never happens again. But I cannot imagine that happening, really, to me, because that is truly one of the worst ways I think you can lose a game. So hopefully the Red Sox are able to bounce back from this loss and just learn from their mistakes and ensure that that call does not happen again. And then the second big news that's happened was that the Royals called up Rich Hill to play for the Major League, which officially makes him the oldest active player in the league. Now, Rich Hill was drafted back in 2002. This man is 45 years old, and he is still playing. He is, like I mentioned before, the oldest active player. Now, he has been going back and forth between the majors and the minors, and now the fact that he is pitching right now for the majors at 45 years old, I think is just a great sight to see. It really does show that no matter how old you are, just as long as you have the grind, the grit, the perseverance, and just the love for the game, you can continue on. Because, truthfully, 45 years old, you would think he would have retired by now. But he didn't. He still loves the game, and he is still going, and I think that's just a great sight to see. So that is all for this episode. Thank you so much. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be talking more about the WNBA. We'll be talking more about football. We will be starting to talk about college football. We will recap the Euros, the Copa America, and so much more. See you next week. Bye.